on for afterwards. All right. So how this is going to work is as long as you guys have questions, just feel free to chime in. There's a small group of us so just feel free to speak up, or you can also chat in the chat box as well, but just literally just ask a question as long as you have it. So let me go pull this up. Well, first off, so let's say welcome for you guys to join this pilot program. I'm super excited to do this. This is my first time actually formalizing teaching a large group over a large period of time over something I really enjoy, which is management consulting and how to get into it. And then we'll go today over my history as well as getting you guys set up and jointed. This might help is that if you guys want to mute all of you guys just in case there's background noise, and then when you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and then join in. And there's a part where you'll have to introduce yourself, so I'll make sure that you guys unmute yourselves on that side. Thank you. So over the next 4 weeks, what I'm hoping is that there's 3 questions that I want you guys to be able to answer. And hopefully the answer is yes to these. And if the answer is no, we'll talk about it as we go on. But my goal for the next 3 weeks is to get you to thinking, is consulting something that you actually want to do? So a lot of people go into their senior years and they assume that consulting is the path that they want, or an internship they want their junior year. But over the next few weeks, as you guys begin casing and learning more about what consultants actually do, I want you guys to ask yourselves, is this something you actually want to do full time? So my goal for this bootcamp is not just to tell you guys tactically how to get into consulting, but also why everything is relevant to the job itself. What I found has been a really good metric is that if you enjoy the casing interview process, you'll enjoy the job. Second, I want to answer the question of what firms actually look for in an ideal candidate. So we'll look at it as a whole, as in between the different industries, but also what I want us to be able to do is to answer the question of what do each individual firms look for? For example, what does Bain look for? What does McKinsey look for? What does BCG look for that differs between all the different firms? And next, just lastly, is my goal is to get you guys to think like a management consultant. And we'll get into why this is so important afterwards. So how this will work is that every single week we'll have 4 lessons. Each lesson will be very similar to this, where you'll have a module where we'll go to one of the topics. There'll be plenty of Q&A, and then everything that you guys don't get answered on this call, or if you want to ask it privately, we'll have one-on-one sessions following every week. So this is going to be something that you guys will self-schedule. But based on, hey Chase, do you mind muting? I think there's background noise. Awesome, thank you. So it seems like to me, Thursdays work best for everyone, especially around this time, 7 p.m. Pacific Coast time and 10 p.m. Eastern Coast time. So if this doesn't work for you, let me know. But it seems like to me from the polls that we did, this is an ideal time. And if we can keep it every week this time, it might make us keep on a consistent schedule. It'll be easier to deliver these. And of course, if you have to miss one, we'll record everything and have our one-on-one catch-ups. So one of the questions I got asked this week is, can I use the one-on-one time for casing if I'm not ready to show my resume or my cover letter yet? Or vice versa, I feel like I'm good with my resume and my cover letter. Can I just case the whole time? Absolutely. The one-on-one time is for you to get the most value out of what it is that you are doing. So in that case, feel free to use the one-on-one time as much as you can. And I'll reach out and we'll schedule those so that you can have the most benefit of it. But other than that, every week, we're planning to have these sessions where I'll teach something that's relevant to the interview process, as well as just the recruiting process, and answer any questions you have as a group or individually. So what I'm expecting of you is ask questions. There's really no stupid question. I remember going into one of my cases, and the market case was about reassurance, and I actually had no clue what reassurance was. And I asked at the end, out of curiosity, after I solved the case, what is reassurance? And then it totally just ruined the case because I didn't understand it. So everything from particular topics to literally you can ask me, Davis, what's the difference between a gross margin and operating margin? Or better yet, what is a case interview? So no question is too stupid to ask. Just continue to ask them. Second, I want you guys to give feedback. So I'll send out surveys after every module before next week's module. But I want you guys to give me feedback about what's working, what isn't working, because this is ultimately your experience. I want this to help you guys as much as possible. For example, if you feel like I'm going too slow with the materials, let me know that. If you think I'm going too fast, let me know, because I want this to work for you guys. And third, reach out for help. As in, you're not alone. You have the whole community here. You have myself. So if you ever have any questions, for example, if you get an email from a partner asking you to meet up and you ask me, what question should I ask? Let me know, and happy to brainstorm that with you. So I want to spend the next couple of minutes talking about myself and why consulting. And hopefully this answers the first question, which is consulting something that you actually want to do? So the left-hand side is my offer letter I got a couple of years ago. And then the right-hand side are all the gifts I got when I left Bain last month. So we'll talk about each of those. But so a little bit about me is that I didn't start recruiting until my senior year of college. And it was about 4 weeks before the deadline when I was at the time working at a startup for 2 years. And the startup was located in New York. And what we were trying to do is to empower introverts by creating online courses. And at the time, I thought I was going to come back to the startup full time. And it was actually the advice of both the founders who had successfully founded other companies who said, Davis, you're great. You're going to love being an entrepreneur. You're going to be successful. But before that, we think that the first thing you should do before you get into consulting or get into startup life is to get into consulting. It was also biased because they also came from very similar backgrounds and became very successful. And they said the training that you get in consulting is unparalleled, the network you build, as well as the standards that you'll be held upon. So I took their advice, and instead of going back straight into a startup, I decided to recruit for consulting. And at the time, I didn't know how to case. I didn't know what to look for a resume or cover letter. So a lot of it I had to figure out on my own. And so that's why the point of this bootcamp is it's everything I wish I had when I was recruiting that could have saved me so much time. And of course, the right-hand side is just when I left, and it's just the gifts. And we'll talk about why each of those are so significant throughout the next couple of weeks. But what I wanted out of my consulting experience my senior year was I wanted to know what kind of startup I wanted to work in. So I wanted different exposures to different industries and to different career paths. Second, I wanted to grow professionally and personally. As in, one of the things I loved about the startup life was that you were learning new things every single day. So for example, 1 week I was trying to figure out how do we get Bill Gates to do a podcast with us. And the next week I was trying to figure out how does JetBlue do a corporate deal with us. And it was just always trying to get the company staying floating, even if it meant one day when our electricity ran out, biking all our computers to the nearest library so that we can work from the library. So everything in between, found out I was always growing professionally as well as personally, and I wanted to keep that going. And then third, I just wanted to meet friends and mentors who I'll always have for the rest of my career, because I felt that was very important to me since I learned that you can't do everything on your own. And how did it actually work out though? So this is what actually happened. So on this, what you'll find is one of my goals I mentioned is to get exposure to different cases and different experiences. So during my time at Bain, so this is what's known as a people portal. So you'll get this when you work at any of the consulting firms, is that you get a list of all the clients that you've ever worked for. So in this case, over 2 years, I worked in 11 different projects. And you can see that they range from different private equity firms to working at an internet startup to hedge funds to tech to launching product drugs. And of course, the one I circled is education. So I worked on a pro bono project that helped a low-income school district figure out a teacher retention strategy. And that became something I really loved doing, as in I look forward to it. I worked on the weekends because I wanted to, not because anyone forced me. But the answer is that I was able to get exposure to different types of projects. So I did everything from, for example, researching protein powder every day for 3 weeks, trying to figure out if a private equity firm should buy this protein powder company. The answer is yes, and they bought it within a week. And then other times, I was helping an internet startup launch their first product. So I was essentially going on the field and researching how people use their smartphones, how people use headphones, and what is missing in that space. So as you can see from this list of just 11 cases, you get a wide breadth of experience as well as jobs that you do. So I did everything from interviewing customers down to building models to meeting with the CEO to talk about how their drug launch is going to affect a population of 10,000 people who need their drug today. So that was quite a powerful experience. Second, I wanted to grow professionally as well as personally. And one of the things you'll find in consulting is this is what is called a up or out model, which seems a little harsh, which is that if you don't get promoted, you get kicked out. But really what that means is that you're always being asked to do more. So every case that I had at Bain became harder than the previous case. And then there was never a case where I was expected to do less than my previous case. So over the time, I was able to develop everything from hard skills to soft skills. And this is from someone else's words, just so you know that it's not biased. But one of the things that Bain, as well as other consulting firms, is known for is challenging you to develop as well as to become a better person. So by the end of your time in consulting, you should have left feeling better equipped to do whatever it is that you want to do afterwards. So this was also a check mark. But probably the biggest check mark to me was this third box I wanted, which was to meet friends and mentors who I'll have for the rest of my life. And when you leave Bain, McKinsey, or BCG, or most consulting firms, you do what's called a goodbye email. So I sent mine out 3 weeks ago. And in my goodbye email, I asked people if they would be willing to get monthly updates. So this is something they would have to opt in. And then within a couple of days before my Bain account was deactivated, I got over 84 people from my office to opt in. So 84 people, about 25% said, yeah, Davis, 20%, I would love to stay in touch with you. And that spoke a lot to me of the type of environment you get from consulting. So all the things I wanted in consulting when I left, they all checked off the box. So that was one of the reasons why I highly am a promoter of starting your career in consulting is if you're willing to learn, build mentors, as well as figure out what you want to do long-term, it's the type of place to be. Of course, there's also long hours and a lot of work that needs to be done, but the payoffs are amazing. So that's a little more about why I wanted to go into consulting. But while I was at consulting, I also loved recruiting. So over the time, I'm not sure how many tours, I must have given at least 40 or 60 office tours. So in fact, when I sent my goodbye email, Leah, who is head of our recruiting at Bain in SF, just sent me this thank you email because there were so many times when people couldn't do a case or couldn't give a tour, and I would just volunteer to do it because it's something I really love. And the bottom is just an email. So on my last day at Bain, usually on your last day, what you want to do is spend time with people you care about, your case teams, your old managers, your mentors, whoever. But I, in traditional me, decided I wanted to spend it recruiting. So I actually spent the day taking new recruits around, people who are interviewing this cycle around the office and just introducing them to Bain. So that's just to say how much I really enjoy this process. And of course, over the time, I've been pretty lucky in that the people I've worked with have significantly had a high chance, almost half, of getting into an offer from a Bain, a McKinsey, or a BCG, compared to the average, which is about 2%. So I've been pretty lucky on that. And it's been all over the world, as in helping my friends or just people who reach out to me who want a position in North America or China or anywhere, really. So this is what I really care about is for this pilot is that even if we decide not to run it again after this, is during the time that we run it, I want each of you to feel as though I'm invested in your success. And this is something that I deeply care about. And if you feel like I'm not, hopefully that's some feedback that I'll be getting as well. But I'm hoping to use this track record to help each and every one of you over the next few weeks, as well as afterwards. So a common question I get is, how many hours do you spend per week for successful? So I ended up reaching out to a couple people who were successful, as well as my friends who weren't, and I asked them how much time they invested. So the evidence speaks for itself. So this is a median of the number of hours. So obviously, some people with no offers will spend more than 15 hours, and some people with offers spent way more. As in, during my recruiting season, given how far behind I was, I spent roughly 30, 40 hours every week casing or doing interviews or meeting people. So that's not to say that you can't do it in 15 or less, but this is just to show you that the people who get offers, directionally, they're spending a lot more time, and it's almost a side job or a full-time job for many people. And of course, your mileage will vary. There are people who spent way less than 15, and there are people who spend way more than 15 who didn't get it, or less than 15 who did. So this is just to give you approximation to say that if you're trying to go to recruiting, it's going to be a significant portion of your time. Again, feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions or anything. I realize I can't see the chat box while I'm also presenting, so if you have a question, feel free to just chime in. But I also started thinking about what makes successful candidates successful and what did they have in common. And one of the three things I noticed is these three traits, regardless of all the people who I've helped or people who didn't help who got in, were grit, support, and they were just intrinsically motivated. So grit is that they might have bombed their first case, their 10th case, or even their 20th case, but they kept going. In fact, there was one of my best friends, he's now at McKinsey, when he actually did not get an offer his junior year for any internships, and he cased probably around 30, 40 cases, and he knew that he wasn't good, but senior year, he just came back and did another 40. So he's up to about 80. He's an exceptional case, but eventually got an offer from McKinsey, took it right away, and he's loved it ever since. But the fact that he was showing this grit, even though the feedback said that he wasn't anywhere near good, even after his first 40 cases, he kept going. And it's just something that you need to do, is that casing is a hard process. As in, if I had to be honest with myself, I didn't feel comfortable with casing until probably around my 30th case. In fact, on my 28th case, my friends and I had a celebration because I finally cracked the case for the first time without anyone giving me a clue or recommending that I switch my direction. So just to show you that your mileage varies. I also have friends who, after 5 cases, received their offers from Bain, McKinsey, BCG. But again, those people are more exceptions to the rules than they are. Second is you need to find at least one person who is going to support you throughout the process. So you can call this a case buddy, or you can just find this a friend who you spend time with. But one of the things I found is that everyone who's been successful had at least one person who is as dedicated as they were to their success. It could have been a senior to a senior, a junior to a senior, or even in rare cases, a senior to someone who already has an offer or an alum. But you need to find that person who is going to support you. One of my best friends at Bain, his story was that he's from a non-target school, and he could not find a case buddy except for one who was on the West Coast, and of all places at UCLA. So he decided every day they would get on around 7 p.m., 10 p.m. his time on the East Coast, and they would case for 2 hours until it was like midnight for him. And they did this for 2 months straight. And now he has an offer at Bain, and his friend also does have an offer as well. And the fact that even though they're in 2 campuses that were non-target schools, the fact that they've met each other through a previous experience and decided to both case and be so diligent, doing their cases online and for 2 hours at a time, they were both successful. As in, you need to have someone who's willing to case with you regularly because they are someone who is going to push you. And third, they're just intrinsically motivated. As in, the best casers I know, interestingly enough, they didn't start off wanting an offer. As in, having an offer is nice, but one of the things that they had in common was they wanted to improve just their thinking ability. So one of the things when I started consulting interviews, I said to myself that even if I don't get an offer, if I can leave the process feeling as though I'm a better entrepreneur or I'm better at solving business problems, then that in itself would have been enough for me to say that it was worth the time investment. So they're always trying to get better, and you'll find these people, and I'm pretty sure there are many people who you know who are at the firms that you want to or have offers who are like this, as in they started off and over time they just got a lot better. So as long as you show these 3 traits, you're way ahead of the pack and ahead of the people who are just trying and most likely won't get an offer. So just keep these things in mind throughout the next couple of weeks, as well as just throughout any recruiting that you do. So, okay, enough about me. This time, I actually want to know about you guys. So on the next page, there's going to be a bunch of pictures of you. And I want to ask you guys to do a few things for the group. I want you to say your name, what school you're from, what year, and then answer this question. If you're in a room of 100 totally random people, and if you could do one thing better than everyone else in the room, and you would get $1 million, what is the one thing that you would do? All right. So this is what I have here. And let me know if I grabbed the wrong picture. Apologies there. Grab the first thing I could get on LinkedIn. So, Mena, do you want to start?
Yeah, cool. I can go first. So my name is Meghna, and I go to UC Berkeley, and I'm a rising senior. If there was one thing I could do, that's difficult, but I'd say painting.
Painting? Like hand painting or like any particular painting?
Just like art, like canvas painting.
Nice. Awesome. Allison, you there?
Oh, hi. I'm on my iPad, so I'm not sure if this is working.
It's working.
Is it? Okay, cool. So, hi, I'm Allison. I'm from Berkeley. I'm a junior. And the one thing I think would just be like being happy. I'm a pretty happy person. I think that's something that's like, yeah, I don't know.
Being a happy person, I like it. And then if you find a happier person in that room, I imagine you guys can just be best friends and you don't need the $1 million. In fact, they probably need you half the $1 million anyways. Awesome. Thanks, Allison. Giovanni is not here today, and Krista is also not here. Lena, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, I'm Alina. I'm a rising senior at Yale. So I'm debating between two. I can't sing and I can't dance. So if I could do something really awesome, it would be dancing or singing. And a side note, I love Davis. I literally met him my freshman year, and I met him through a pre-orientation program called CC, Cultural Connections. And I just realized that I haven't seen him in like literally 3 years. And I didn't realize that was the case because we had been keeping in contact, and he's going to teach you guys a lot of stuff, and I'm really excited for this program.
It's almost like I've paid you.
No, I love Davis. He's amazing. Literally just like message him about everything and anything, and he's going to want you to succeed.
I really appreciate it. All right, Zane, you up there?
All right. My internet's a little shaky here, but so I'm a rising senior at Pomona College, small liberal arts school in SoCal. I don't know. I don't know what I do with $1 million. I guess that's kind of why I'm trying to get into consulting, figure out what I really want to do. So.
Thanks, Zane. Well, hopefully you tell me what the answer is, because I would love to know when I have $1 million when that happens.
All right.
Jagger, you there?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Shaker. I go to the University of Minnesota. From Minnesota originally. If I could do one thing really well better than those people, maybe juggle a soccer ball. I'm not super good. I was never good at soccer, but I'm good at juggling. I think I could get up to maybe like 70 or 100.
Wait, do you have a video of this?
No, but I'll record one for you if you really want to see it.
All right. You know what? Tell you what, guys. I'm gonna start a Facebook group, and we're just gonna post a private group for us. Like, you just post random things.
Sounds good.
Sorry, thank you so much. All right,
Yep.
Chase. Not sure if I grabbed the right photo. This is like a LinkedIn of your first and last name. So apologies if it is not your picture. All right, Chase, you there? Uh-oh. Okay. Chase, we will get back to you. Jason.
All right, cool. So my name's Jason. I go to UC Berkeley. I am a senior. If there's one thing that I can do better than everyone else in the room, probably be like eating hot Cheetos. Yeah. Hopefully they'll give me money for that. That'd be a nice job.
That's awesome, Jason. All right, I want a video of that too.
Okay, I got you.
All right, Chase, are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Is this the right photo? I scraped your LinkedIn. I'm not sure if this is the right one.
Yeah, I mean, it's my LinkedIn.
Cool. Awesome. Did you catch
yeah, yeah, I did catch the clips. It was good stuff.
All right. You want to introduce yourself as well, your name, your school, your year, and one thing you think you're better than a group of random 100 people at.
Yeah. And sorry, I think I had like 2 mute buttons going on my phone, so it was like confusing. So I'm a rising senior at Stanford. And yeah, my name's Chase Navalier. And what would I do? Probably foosball.
Foosball?
Yeah.
Nice. I like that. All right, guys. Thanks for introducing yourselves. It feels weird when you guys are on mute. It feels like I'm just talking to myself in front of a laptop. So feel free to chime in with questions or so forth. I know I will get you guys on one-on-ones as well. But the reason I want you guys to introduce yourselves to each other is that I want you to realize that you're in this together. Oop, Chase, I think you're clicking or one of the wrong mute buttons there. But the reason I wanted you guys to introduce yourselves is I was going and putting this slide deck together this weekend, and I ran across this picture. And in the bio I sent you guys about the info for the bootcamp, you guys might have mentioned I mentioned a story of two of my best friends. Well, when I started off senior year, as I mentioned, had no consulting experience, hadn't cased before. And two of my friends who I knew a little bit before casing, we were three people who wanted to get jobs in consulting for various reasons. One of them because she was turned down her junior year, and the other because he had quit the pre-med track his senior year and decided he didn't want to go to med school and just other things, wanted to do consulting. And we didn't know how to case at the time, but we read every book that we could. We read Victor Chang, Case in Point. We read every book that we saw every video, and we decided to case with each other. In the beginning, it was the blind leading the blind, essentially. But the girl, Shirley, was a little better, so she put us up. But long story short is that we made this commitment to each other that we would always have each other's back throughout the process. So every day, I would case 2 cases each with them. So 4 cases, 4 hours total. And we did this for 2 months straight, so 8 weeks, pretty much 7 days a week. And over the period of time, we became friends. As in, I would consider them some of my best friends today. In fact, I'm gonna go visit each of them. But I remember the first time we all got our first rounds back and we all got rejected from our first interviews. So Shirley got rejected from McKinsey because she was just so nervous about her case. Tony was rejected from BCG because he had messed up his math. And I also was rejected from BCG my first round because of fit. And we'll get into that later on the fit section. But I remember at the time, we just went into the library, started casing. We were just so sad. And I said, guys, I have an idea. We're all going to continue to case. We're going to keep this promise. At the end of this, we're all going to get consulting offers. But this is what I want. The first person who gets a consulting offer has to treat the other 2 people to dinner. And so 2 weeks later, Shirley received her first consulting offer. And I said, hey, Shirley, time to go to dinner. And so the picture we took here is the first dinner we had. And you can't see it, but this is the first of at least 7 entrees that we had that night. The bill came out to be roughly about $80, $90 a person. And Shirley, of course, paid that with her signing bonus. And it was a great way for us to celebrate. So at the end of dinner, Shirley said, hey, this is not fair. This is like almost a $300 bill. It's like, okay, next person has to do it. And so it was my turn, and a week later, I received my offer from Bain, and I said, all right, guys, we're going to go have dinner. And same idea is that the bill came out, and we ended up paying it. And then Tony, when he received his offer, decided, you know what, just to be fair, let's go out to dinner again. And Tony's bill actually came out to be the most expensive, so he just got progressive. But again, it wasn't about the fact that we were in consulting, it was the fact that we became so close friends that we eventually, when we all got our offers, decided we all wanted to go to San Francisco so we can just stay in touch. And I pretty much, when I was in San Francisco, I would spend most of my weekends with them, at least one of the days. And in fact, the 2 of them are dating today, and I'm pretty sure they'll be engaged soon as well. So not saying that you're going to meet your soulmate in this boot camp or you're going to meet it during casing, but just to say that one of the benefits of casing was the fact that I was able to become so close to my friends. And you'd be amazed how many couples come out of this, but this is just one example. But overall, I want you guys to remember that you're all in this together. And after today, I will start a Facebook group, we'll start an email chain, and you guys can start supporting each other, casing. You can be as interactive as you want or as little as you want. But just a reference here is that you never know what happens when you start. As in, between all 3 of us, I don't forget how many rejection letters we received and how many times that we had to console each other. But the end goal was that we all ended up working in great consulting firms. We enjoyed our time. And now incidentally enough, we're all at startups, but another conversation for another time. So just keep that in mind, is that the benefit of this is that even if you don't get an offer right away, one of the things you do have is the support network. All right, so we'll get into the lesson for today. Now that all that is over, I wanted to use today to cover 3 things. I want to go through the recruiting process, explain to you how it works and how a recruiter thinks. Second, we'll learn about what makes a resume stand out. And third, I'll explain my favorite part, which is the cover letter, which a lot of people underestimate the power of and how it can make or break your first round invite. So why does today matter? Short answer is this. It doesn't matter how great your casing is if your resume and cover letter don't earn you the opportunity. So there are people who invest so much time into casing that they never spend time polishing their resume and their cover letter. And one of the shameful things is that I'm pretty sure they would have passed the casing interview, but they didn't even pass the initial screen. So this is why it's so important today, and why we didn't go straight into casing, is I want you guys to make sure that you have your bases covered, so you even have the opportunity to show your skills. So let's start with the first goal, which is the recruiting process and how a recruiter thinks. So how recruiting works. So this is essentially how the recruiting process works, is it goes in 4 stages. You have your resume and your cover letter, which starts off with everyone who commits, and about 30 or 40% will get into a first round casing interview. From there, 10 or 20% of the remainders will get a second round interview, and then eventually you get an offer letter, which is 1 or 2%. And we'll get into these particular numbers in a bit, but a question that you guys asked me on the type form is who actually goes through each of these processes. So I'll go into depth today about the resume and cover letter and briefly cover the casing. But essentially how it works is the longer you are in the process, the more senior the people are involved. So in the screening and resume process, one of the common errors I see is that people try to smooth and try to be friends with the recruiter, which is great, but the recruiter actually isn't the person who's reading your resume and cover letters. Yes, they take it, they greet you, they put the info sessions together. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the consultants and the analysts. So I'm using analysts as a proxy for anyone with a bachelor's or master's degree who's starting their career in consulting. So titles vary. But what will happen is, imagine that I was still at Bain. What happens every year is I'll get a packet of about 100, 120 applications and resumes and cover letters to go through. And it's my job to rank all of them. So imagine ranking 120 people by 120. Next, what happens is other people who rated this 120, I have to meet with them. So we'll get into a table in a room or a call if we're across the country, and we'll talk about the candidates we rated. And yes, we'll talk about all 120. But ideally, there are certain candidates who everyone says should go on. We don't talk about them. And everyone who is just, why are they here, will get rejected. So it's the people who are in the middle who we talk about deliberate for a minute or two to see if we should pass on or not. And from there, you'll go into your casing. But so the resume cover letter, as you mentioned, is read by anywhere from 2 to 8 people. 2 if it is a small area, or 8 if there's just a lot and it's a school that traditionally is a feeder school where you just want varying opinions. And the reason why you have analysts and consultants read is 2 reasons. One, they know the courses and the extracurriculars better than any recruiter could. And then second, and we'll share this story a little bit later, is that many of them have actually worked with you and can know if you're lying or not on your resume or your cover letter, which has actually happened, and people have been disqualified and just essentially warned, this person applies again, remember that we found out that they lied on their cover letter or their resume. And then we'll go into the casing materials next week, but essentially it's more senior people when you get into the second round, and the cases type will shift a little bit, and we'll talk about that next week. And of course, ultimately, everyone wants an offer letter, which is the top 1 to 2%. All right, so how candidates are chosen. So people have this misconceived notion that there's a quota of how many people we can accept. They think that my school traditionally only takes 1 person, or my school only takes 4 people, or whatever it is. So that actually is not how consulting works, or the recruiting process. So there's a bar that you have to pass in order to get it. So it can mean that no one at that school passed the bar that year, will recruit no one, or it can be the extreme, which is that 10 people from the school pass, and we take them. A good example this season was at Bain was Brigham Young University, BYU, who traditionally isn't what you would call a feeder target school. But in fact, in the intern class, I think they had like 10 interns out of 30 interns I talked to. Then that's an overrepresentation for that one particular year from a school that you wouldn't think of as a traditional target school. But that's just to say that their crop that year was just amazing. So the way to think about how consulting applications are rated is that it doesn't matter how the average is. You're not competing against your friends, or you're not competing against the people who are applying. You're competing against the bar. As in, let's imagine that in a world, Bain only takes, and this is a hypothetical, takes what they consider 9s and 10s. So on the left-hand side, you have a normal distribution. Let's say that this is a school that's just a normal school. You take your 9s and your 10s. So you take about 10% of the people who apply. And then on the right-hand side, you have this other population where it's just underqualified, as in most of the people don't, as in their average skill set is a 4. But you can see there's more 9s and 10s out there. So the acceptance rate is actually 16%. Now, I want you guys to remember this. So every time that you think about comparing yourself to the person or trying to see, am I the one person they'll take this year? Wrong way to think about it. or put it in a literal term, if you watch sports, say basketball, and imagine that you had a chance to recruit the basketball team, and even though there's only 5 starting positions, let's imagine that you had 6 or 7 people who played basketball like Steph Curry or LeBron James or Michael Jordan. You're probably going to take all 7 of them. Doesn't matter. You're going to make room for them. Same thing in consulting is there's no quota. Think about it from a business point of view. If you can hire an all-star, why would you not hire them? As in the difference between hiring 40 people and 42 people in a year isn't that much of a difference if you believe that they can do the job. So this is one myth that I want you guys to leave having known, because you're not competing against your neighbor. You're not competing against your friend. In fact, helping your friend will help you. You're trying to pass the bar. And the bar in this case we'll talk about now is what's called the acid test. So if you think about, if I have to boil down how consultants rate, so we get a rubric when we go through the interview process or the screening process. But essentially, there's one question that we're trying to ask. And this is across all firms, no matter if it's a boutique, a big 4, or a big 3. And this acid question is, do I feel comfortable putting this person in front of my client? And if the answer is no, or if the question is possibly not, you're not going to pass the bar. So every time you pass, every time you get screened, every time you get interviewed, the interviewer will ultimately in their head, his or her head, ask this question: do I feel comfortable putting this applicant in front of a client who I built relationships with over many years? So, but how does this actually break down? And feel free to ask questions, guys, as usual. First, is this person able to do the job? So you can think about this as the analytical part as well as the structured thinking. So this is where they're thinking about, do you have the mental capacity to be able to do the job? Second, is this person client friendly? So can I put this person in front of a client and know that they won't stutter, they won't make our firm look like a bunch of idiots? Third, is this person someone I want to work with? As in, do I feel like this person's fun? Do I feel like they fit into the culture? And lastly, is this person coachable? So this one doesn't get mentioned a lot, and I wish it did more, but the humility and the feedback is just amazing. As in, there are people who meet the first 3 buckets, but never hit the 4th one. And we'll talk a little bit about this in the upcoming sections. But the coachability is, you could be someone who's a rock star today. You can have great presentation skills. You can be someone I think I enjoy working with. But if I feel as though you have a big ego, or every time you stumble, you're not willing to learn, your potential, your ceiling is pretty much set. The reason why this is so important is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, management consulting is a job about growing yourself every single role. Every case gets harder. So if you're a rock star today, but you're not coachable, you tend to stagnate. And as a result, I'd rather not hire you to begin with than to watch you just struggle later on. So this is why humility and feedback are so important. And I wish that other case books have talked about this more, because out of the conversations I've had with people, there have been so many applicants who we rejected because of this coachability factor. So we'll get more into that and how it applies. So these are the 4 questions I want you guys to take note of, because this is the literal rubric in which you are judged when your resume screen, your cover letter screen, your case interview is done, is all 4 of these sections. And I'll send this out as well, but this is a way to think about the different processes and then the type of questions that go into it. So no need to read it now. I'll send this out. But one thing you guys want to be aware of is how 4 of these relate to each part of the process. So if I had to simplify what you need to do over the next couple of weeks, is to demonstrate to the firm that you're going to that you can do the job, you're client friendly, you're someone they want to work with, and you're coachable. And this is just a couple of guidelines of how we think about it from a recruiter's point of view. So literally every weekend, or even certain times when I had to do like 300 over a cycle, I would sit down on a weekend and rate people based on the resume cover letter part of this. Any questions?
Yeah, you said you might go into it, but how exactly did you screen for being coachable? I mean, how did you what are some ways that we can also, demonstrate that in a way? Because you said you're basing it on resumes. Mm-hmm. How do you see that in a resume? Or are you talking like in the interview process?
That's a good question. That's more of the interview and the case process. And we didn't get into this in the resume and cover letter, but there have been people who have 4.0s and in their cover letters continue just to brag about the things that they've done. And there's no sense of self-reflection. There's no sense of being able to improve yourself. As in, there seems like they're a perfect candidate and they try quite hard. As in, there have been times when we've rejected so many 4.0s because we have such a limited interviewing time that the coachability piece becomes the tiebreaker. But it really comes into piece in the case interview and the fit interview, which I'll go over next week. But it's essentially making sure that you know that you're showing humility is how I would put it. As in, you know that you're a recent grad, you're trying to prove yourself, but at the same time, you're not perfect. Good question. Awesome. Any more questions, guys, on this section? All right. So why cover letter and resume? Well, it's the first impression of who you are. It's a pre-screener if you can do the test or you can do the job. And it just tests basic abilities, like taking the time to include a resume and cover letter, just error checking, and just being thoughtful about what you communicate. So these seem pretty obvious, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't do these. So again, the resume, I'm highlighting the first three parts to your question about coachability is the main things that we're looking for is the ability to do the job, the demonstration of communication, as well as wanting to work with you. And of course, some of the things that didn't pass the minimum bar is generic resumes. So one of the things is it takes so little time to customize a resume, as in there were resumes for people who were applying for med school who applied it for the same consulting, as in you had their CVs, you had their research they've written. It was so technical that I had no clue why they were doing it. And there were people who were obviously doing engineering and just scatter shooting their resumes. Those get shot down, and they're very obvious when you didn't take the time to demonstrate why your accomplishments are relevant to consulting. And this is very easy to do, and we're going to go into it, but it's essentially figuring out what is a consulting job and how can you demonstrate it. So next is having errors. So like formatting, structure, grammar, basic things. And the third one is just being a laundry list. As in, I remember one resume I read was like 5 pages for a college student. I'm thinking to myself, come on, this is like everything you've done since freshman year of high school. There needs to be a little more thoughtfulness in fitting in. Again, resumes, I have to be honest with you, get about 2 minutes at most of people reading it. And I found out I was one of the ones who spent more time on resumes and cover letters than most people. But so you want to make it as streamlined as possible, as well as making what are the most important things you're trying to communicate, because this is also important to the job as well. So an instance of this at work is for a client, you might prepare a 120 slide deck, but you really, in the client meeting, you're only going to show about 10 of those. So it's figuring out what are the 10 most important slides that you need to show to get the client to their work. And doing the resume in a very similar fashion hits at that point. So this is just the minimum bar. And this is just ways that you show it. And again, I'm going to send this all out, is how do you demonstrate all of the different parts of your resume and how do you demonstrate the ability to do the job and so forth. So I'm breezing through the resume part because I want to emphasize that based on what I've seen in the questions you've asked, a lot of people here already know what a resume should be. So I'm just going over the basics, make sure that you guys pass those. And we'll emphasize a lot more on the cover letter and how it relates to your resume. So again, I'll send this out. But there were things that so I've spent this weekend going back through all of the resumes who we passed, regardless of their GPA. And I thought about what is it that they did that made me feel so confident about their ability to do the job. And I had to think about it. There were like these 4 things. One is that they use words that were relevant to consulting. For example, words like analyzed, organized, recommended, created, built. Very simple. Literally just figure out what consulting does and frame it that way, and you just finish your job writing the resume. And second, they demonstrated results. So a common question I get asked a lot, and a few of you guys asked this on the survey as well, is what if you worked for a company or a student organization that didn't quite show results, as in it didn't generate like $100,000, or it didn't produce some income for the client because you left before the internship or the case was over for the internship. So there's 2 ways that I've found that's been pretty cool, is that one, you can demonstrate results that you delivered for your organization, but you can also do it for yourself as well. As in, I was looking back, and one of my favorite resumes actually was a guy who we gave a first round interview because he just showed a lot of potential, even though at the moment he didn't. And one of the things was that he won second place in this 20-person fantasy football league by teaching himself Excel and just analyzing players based on the data. The kicker, of course, was that he's never seen a game of football before. He just wanted to prove that you can use data to win at fantasy sports. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the fact that even though the 20-person league didn't win a prize or anything, he taught himself how to essentially build an Excel model by doing that. And that was pretty cool. And there's a bunch of other examples as well. For example, there was a applicant who taught horseback riding during the summer as one of her internships. And she talked about how she built in this processes so that before they only taught like 5 students. By the end of the summer, they were able to get 50 kids to learn how to ride horses based on just having a structured process. Again, to most people, that doesn't really matter, but the fact that she was able to take that small opportunity and demonstrate that she could produce results were amazing. So again, you don't have to have created billions of dollars in savings for your client. No one expects that, but it's more about the opportunities you were given, were you able to produce results with them? And then third, I talk a lot this with recruiters a lot, is we really like it. And this might be just because we're in San Francisco, but I think it's pretty generally applied, is that people who have a personal touch to their resume. As in, I always get excited when I could talk about the hobbies in the interest lines at the bottom. As in, a lot of people ask me, should I include it because it doesn't seem professional? But in fact, it adds character to you. In fact, one of the people who work at Bain now was in the World Series of Poker, self-funded himself every year that he went. And as a result, it was a very quirky habit. So one of the interviewers that he ended up getting was someone who played poker, and they just hit it off. And of course, he got an offer. And of course, you shouldn't lie. So here's a story. One year, there was a guy who put that he juggled for fun. And while during the interview, at the end of his fit interview, the partner put out a bunch of balls and said, yeah, I'd love for you to juggle just these 3 balls. He could not juggle the balls. So needless to say, he did not get the offer. But on mine, I did magic when I was at Yale. And at the end of my interview, one of the partners for McKinsey as well as for Bain put out a deck of cards and just said, hey, do you want to do some magic? And my fit interview was essentially me doing 15 minutes of magic. So when I got to Bain, they signed me up for 2 magic shows for 2 kids holiday events that they did for the families. And I was like, so I joke. So I was not really hired for my ability to do the job. It was just to entertain your kids right now. So of course, not true, or maybe it's not true, but it was just one of the things that made it a lot more worthwhile. And which is funny because I talked to even the people who interviewed me still remember when I did the magic trick. So again, not saying you have to do magic or learn it, but it's about being personable. And this is one of the things that I wish other books mention was it's okay to put a hobby or an interest. And the last one is just concise. As in resumes that were 12 font or above, fit on one page were the ones I tended to pass. There were ones that were just so small I had to squint, harder time passing. It means that you didn't take the time to choose about what you're doing. Okay, guys. Any questions on this? Cool. Man, you guys.
Wait, I have one question. Sorry.
Yeah.
So would you say like for the concise point, like when you're choosing stuff to include in your resume, is it okay to just have like 3-ish, 3 to 4 experiences in like which are super relevant than having like maybe like 5?
Yeah, it's about the quality, not the quantity. And I'll share you a story. One of my friends that I worked with, his name is Michael. He had literally 2 experiences, which was cooking at a restaurant and managing a student restaurant. And he ended up getting it because even though he only had 2 experiences, he had like 4 or 5 bullets, but they were really good bullets. They explained his potential to do the job. So again, you could literally think of it this way. You could work 10 one-week internships, or you can work 1 internship for 4 years and have a lot more experience. So when you're in concise, it's about, you don't have to include everything, as in, I think for most people, they don't include everything. They include the ones that are just the highest touch. And then for high school, for example, if you decide it, I've seen applicants just take all their high school achievements into essentially 1 line and just have all their achievements laid out versus bullying it and save it. That's how they can save points. That's a good question. Awesome. Any more questions, guys, on the resume part? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of random, but usually when you're reading the resumes, are you reading them on a computer or or are they printed out? And the reason why I asked is because I have my resumes, my font is a little different and it's probably not on everyone's computer. So when they're downloaded, I usually submit PDF anyways, but I was wondering if that's a good idea or I guess along those lines.
Okay, so that varies, but I would say I know maybe 2 people outside of me who will print out all 130 resumes. I like having the physical copy, or when I'm on a train. But pretty much everyone does it on their computers.
Okay.
But yeah, you should submit it as a PDF. And I'm assuming that the font is not like a crazy font that is hard on the eyes. But highly always recommend doing it as a PDF.
Okay. Yeah.
And in fact, if you have an option of uploading as a doc, always PDF.
Okay. Cool. Always PDF. Gotcha.
Always PDF. Good question. Any more questions on the resume, guys?
Yeah, this is somewhat specific, but if you have 2 experiences at the exact same place, should you include that as, like, should you list the employer twice or just list it under the same employer?
Actually, yeah, that's very similar to what I did, Zane. I actually had one internship for 2 years, and I listed it once, but it was actually more impressive because some of the projects I started my first year came out to be on the second year, and it just formed a deeper connection. So instead of listing it twice, I literally just listed it as one experience, but on the dates, I put 2 separate dates for my periods. You can list it as 2 different experiences, that's fine too. And then the point is that, do you demonstrate, so the higher picture is, do you demonstrate the ability to do the job? So it's less about where you worked and how many times you worked there, but it's more about, did you pick the right bullets to summarize what you're doing?
All right.
Did I answer your question?
Yep, definitely.
Awesome. Any more questions, guys? Awesome. Common question is GPA. So I went back through all the candidates that we went through and we passed and didn't pass, and ones that got offered. Lowest one was a 3.0. So if you're below that, unfortunately, but none of you guys are, I can't help you on that. The average seemed to be, the median was about 3.7. And the highest GPA, of course, is or pass, which means that we didn't give an offer or even pass to the first round, was a 4.0. In fact, there were multiple 4.0s who didn't even get a first round interview. So this is to say that GPA is one component, but it's not the most important component. So
could I jump in here?
Yeah.
So GPA is my number one concern. Mine isn't a star by any means. It's pretty much below that median. But if you're in that, you pass the screen or whatever you're going in, does it really make the difference when it comes down to it after you have the first interview?
No. Now, your interviewer will look at your resume and look at your GPA, but other than that, it's more about your case. So when I think about your GPA, it's getting you in the door and give you the opportunity. Again, remember back to our example of the average is that, can you do the job? And if the 3.0 calculated with everything else means you can do the job, then you can do the job. So GPA really only matters to get you in the door. And after that, it's up to you to figure out if you can stay in the house. Good question, though. So the approach I recommend is to take your existing resume and just ask yourself these questions here. Like, have you demonstrated that you can do the role? Do you communicate your track record, essentially your results, as well as your learnings? Can you make your resume more personal? And ultimately, can you reach out to someone who can just check your resumes and catch any errors? And every weakness that you find in your resume, will cover it in the cover letter. So I know we're also approaching the time. It looks like we had a lot of content. So if anyone has to go, just feel free to leave, and I will make sure to catch up with you and send all of this out. But I want to make sure, but I'm going to stay on as long as we need to answer all your questions and your cover letter, because making sure you guys understand this is the most important thing to me. So there's some couple resources I recommend, and I'll send this out. Is one, your career services. All of you guys go to schools with great career services. Go to them, have your resume read. Get your friends or connections with management consulting to do it. And one thing I really loved is when I was a senior, for my resumes, I use a site called Fiverr. So if you've never heard of Fiverr, it's essentially you pay people $5 to do some random job. And a lot of the jobs is just proofreading. As in, they can't tell you the structure or change the bullets or anything, but they literally will spell check and grammar check for you. So I spent like $10 per resume per firm, and I would send it to someone in London. So because they were 5 hours ahead, I would send it at night, so they would work on it while I sleep. And in the morning, I would just retrieve it. And I was like, done. So I usually like to do that. And secret between all of us, I also did that with my college essays as well, or my college courses, is even though they couldn't tell me feedback on how to structure my courses, every essay I had, if I needed someone to proofread it overnight, I would just send it over to London, and then somebody would read it in London. And by the time I woke up, it was proofread, I'd make the changes, submitted it to class, went on my day. And of course, I attribute that definitely to a lot of success. So Fiverr or any, thank you. I'll tell you guys some more stories about Fiverr later, as in there's a lot of things that you can do. And then of course, Yale also has a free resource that is linked here that I'll send out to you guys as well to compare your resumes to other resumes and cover letters. So in summary, pretty much the 3 points is they're testing for your resume should highlight your abilities. Your resume should be different for consulting than it is everything else, and just keep it personal. So summary of the resume. All right, before we move on to the cover letters, any questions on the resume part?
Yeah, I have a question quickly about like relevant coursework, or if there's like, should that be included at all? If so, like what is considered relevant coursework for consulting?
Good question. So we can talk about that more, but yes, so relevant courses and any research that you've done is incredible. So when I think about relevant courses, I think anything that tests your analytical abilities. For example, it could be anything from data structures, even though we don't work with data structures, to engineering, to any research-heavy courses you've taken. So little things that you should not include is, for example, if you're an economics major and you take intro to economics, micro, macro, it's assumed that you're an economics major, you're going to take it. I'm looking for like econometrics. I'm looking for heavy statistics or even any Bayesian statistics or so forth. But if you're, let's say, a biology major and you happen to take like a statistics course or you take an economics course, that's pretty relevant, because that's things that I don't see. I don't see that as a English major, you took all these stat courses or these calculus courses or these linear algebra courses. So that's how I would think about as relevant courses in research. So the answer is yes, you should include it, but only the ones that are going to differentiate you from other people. So for example, when on my relevant courses, I ended up taking a couple of grad courses. So I ended up putting those, and I audited some MBA courses. So I put those because those wouldn't be apparent on my transcript because I audited a bunch of them. But then any high level math that I took were most relevant. And I also had research papers. I don't think I included those personally, but a bunch of my friends who were doing research also included the relevant research.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Any more questions, guys? Cool. So onto the cover letter. So this is actually my favorite part. As in, I absolutely love the cover letter, because the cover letter, everyone thinks about the resume, but the cover letter is like the lesser known cousin or the less attractive sibling that people don't think about, but has so much impact in how you're perceived. So cover letters are the same thing as a resume. First impressions, they screen for your ability and they test basic abilities like your soft skills. But people just overlook this as if, yeah, I'm just gonna put one together. But a cover letter actually makes or breaks your application. So for example, I'll talk about some minimum bars here, is that a lot of times, because the number of people we interview is so limited in a first round, that people who don't include cover letters and they're on defense, most likely we're just going to go with no, because you didn't take the extra hour or two to even put together a basic cover letter. You'd be amazed at how many applicants don't include a cover letter. It's amazing. And then that's like the first thing. If you take anything away, include a cover letter. Second, having errors. So this is probably one of the sadder stories, but so one of the people I had to read on the cover letter for a position was a great applicant. So she had like a 3.9, double major in biology as well as economics, submitted pretty much everything. Her cover letter was great, or her resume was great. And then she submitted the wrong cover letter. So instead of the Bain cover letter, she did one for another firm and said, this is the greatest firm to work for. That is all I wanted to do since I started freshman year. And everything else was about her was just so good. And the worst thing was that when I looked at who it was actually a friend of mine. So for some reason, I didn't screen this, where I got to screen one of my own friends. And so obviously I rated her really high because of her potential. I was like, it's a small error. But I got to the meeting the following week where we discussed at that batch was like about 200. So we sat through about 4 hours thinking through these 400 applications or so forth. And when hers came up, people just said no. She wasn't careful enough, and she didn't get a return, or she didn't get the offer to interview. And I remember I reached out to her and I said, hey, you're gonna hear your results today. And then she's like, I realized what I did last night. I'm not gonna get an offer, am I? She's like, no. And I said no. So having errors, Terrible, terrible. As in, this can be anything from misspelling a name of a person to including the wrong firm. So be cautious of that. Third is being a laundry list. So your cover letter should not be a repeat of your resume. And then if that was the case, we wouldn't even include a cover letter. So be careful of that. And the fourth one is name dropping just to name drop. I will admit, I love it when I can just see my own name in a resume. And I will admit, I do rate it higher when I see my own name. But to be honest with you, like a lot of questions you guys asked was, does name dropping matter? It really doesn't. The only thing it shows is that you took the time to get to talk to someone. But to be honest with you, let's imagine that you were applying for a full-time position, and let's say you name dropped somebody who works in the Chicago office while I worked in the San Francisco office, and we never connected. I have no clue if that person's a real person or just a random name that you made up, because there's like 8,000 employees. So name dropping, if you have a reason to do it, like my brother was in consulting or my best friend was in consulting, those are the greatest stories. But the only time that it works is if you actually have a connection to this person and they actually showed you something that you wouldn't do. If you're name dropping just to name drop, just don't do it. As in my cover letter, I don't even think I included anyone that I knew from Bain, McKinsey, or BCG, even though there was a good portion of them. And in fact, here's a really random story, but one time my name was on a resume or a cover letter of someone who I had not spoken to, but somehow they included me. And they said how great it was talking to me. And I like to think I have a good memory. I never remember talking to this person. So this person was on the fence. And then the person who was reading his resume in his committee emailed me and said, hey, this person's on the fence. Your name was name dropped. Can you verify that you spoke to this person? And I was like, I went to my calendar. I actually don't remember ever speaking to this. In fact, I'm looking at this person. I was like, we wouldn't have overlapped. And they're like, great, we're not taking him. So again, I really love seeing my name dropped. I really do. But do it very relevantly or in a way that conveys a better message than just, I know this random person. So that has always been to my favor. So be careful with that. Hopefully I covered that, because that was a very common question that you guys asked, was the name dropping. So awesome. So your goals for your cover letter are to highlight your strengths in your resume that are not evident in your resume. So for example, if your resume doesn't talk about, and I'll go through this a little more example, but imagine that you join an extracurricular activity and you were able to raise money for this club. But for example, let's imagine that a club was banned from campus for 4 years, or it took you 200 tries to be able to get your first funder. This is something that is demonstrating grit that is not evident on your resume. That should be on your cover letter. Second, it addresses any gaps or holes you have in your application. For example, if you have a problem with your GPA, or if you don't have consulting background, being able to measure that. So mention at the top of the hour, I talked about my friend Tony, who stopped his pre-med track. He had no business background. All he did was research every single summer. So his entire cover letter was essentially talking about, hey, I'm not the traditional application. My GPA, or his GPA met it, so he didn't address it. But he said, I know I come from a research background, and it seems like I was going to go to pre-med, but I realized after last summer of research that this is a slow process, and I really want to do is consulting. It's fast-paced. And essentially what he talked about was how using the scientific method applies to being hypothesis-driven. He talked about how his research ability amounts to his ability to be able to do the job and find data. And third, he talked about how he was able to build models and simulations for the experiments he ran. So that applied to his ability to one day be able to learn Excel. So essentially, he was a fast learner. He had applicable skills that you might not see, and he realized that he had the gaps in his help. And this cover letter essentially earned him these resumes or these first-round interviews. And then, of course, one of the questions he gets asked at the fit is, why consulting? And then, of course, he can bring back the resume and the cover letter as a result of that. And the third thing is that it demonstrates your soft skills. So things like being concise, being able to figure out, being thoughtful in your wording, and just being able to research. So those are the goals of your cover letter. And we're going to go a little more in depth into it. As you guys can see, hopefully, I really love the cover letter, because there have been opportunities that I would not have gotten otherwise had it not been for my cover letter. As in, I didn't have a consulting background, came from a startup background, didn't case or anything like that. Like, people had no reason to take me. So one of the strengths not evident is at the top of the hour, I'm also mentioning another friend of mine who's now at Bain, but his name is Michael Park, and he was essentially all he wanted to do was to be a chef. And his internships was working at a Michelin restaurant, and his extracurricular was running a student pop-up restaurant once a week. And not the traditional person who would apply. But in his cover letter, he talked about how his dream is to be a restaurant owner. And he talked about how working through these Michelin star restaurants, he realizes that one thing is to be a great chef, but if he really wants a thriving business, he needs to be able to understand the business skills. So he talked about how his motivation to get into consulting was to build the skill set to be a great business owner. And of course, he talked about how, for example, he has to manage so many ingredients and so many cook teams leads to him being a good leader. He talked about how he had to balance the budget. So he talked about his financial abilities. Even though they weren't advanced, it was a little as like a spreadsheet. He talked about how he's starting to do these things. And as a result, not only did he get a first round, but of course he made it all the way to a final round and got an offer. But someone, when you look at his application, you would not have accepted him as someone you wanted to interview, because it seems like this guy doesn't know what he wants to do. But because his cover letter was written so well and conveyed the fact that he wanted to do this, whoever read his, and thankfully they did, they gave him an offer for a first round interview. So even if you come from an untraditional background or don't feel like you fit in, this is a chance for you to highlight your strengths. Second is to address any gaps in your application. So GPA is a very common one that I wish people addressed. As in, if you have like a 3.3 or 3.0, obviously we're going to see it, but not addressing it in your cover letter means that you're not even aware of it. So I have a good friend who went to Berkeley, and she recently just left Bain as well. But when I first met her, I didn't realize how amazing her story was. It was that she had a below average GPA. That's like between 3 and 3.2. And it actually took her, when she graduated Berkeley, she was like 26, 27. So way older. So it took her more time to graduate college. She had transferred from a community college to Berkeley. And she had a low GPA. As in, those are all reasons you would think to reject someone. But in her application, she talked about the reason why her GPA was so low and it took her so much time is that she was the sole provider for her mom, her dad, and her little sister. And she talked about how she had to work full time while she was a student, and that's why her GPA was so low. But of course, talking about how she manages her family responsibility and the fact that she's able to graduate on time and do everything else, Bain was like, hey, we're going to give you a chance. And of course, they instantly gave her a chance and she rocked it. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been at the firm. But again, this is another area for you to address in your application. So it doesn't have to be GPA. You can substitute GPA for any other thing. For example, you're not at a target school. You don't have the consulting background. Whatever it is, your cover letter is going to be the area where you get to address this. So this is one of my favorite parts of the cover letter, is being able to address your gaps. And then demonstrating soft skills. Okay, so in your mind, I want you to look at both of these cover letters. Just don't have to read them. And just pick which one you think is most appealing after like reading 200 of these. Awesome. Okay, hopefully you picked the left one. Otherwise, you just rejected my cover letter. So the one on the left is my cover letter. So you'll notice that there's 3 things here. One is it's really short, as in there's like so much space, the margin's there. As in, I remember the reason I bring this up is that once I got accepted to Bain, a couple of recruiters came in and visited Davis. It was probably one of the best cover letters we've seen. As in, it was really short. It was very well formatted, and it's like you spoke the language, and we'll get to all that. But what essentially, you'll get a copy of I'll send my cover letter as well if you guys find out helpful. But essentially, the soft skills you demonstrate here is 1, it's a lot shorter. So I'm picking essentially all the right points. 2, I'm hitting at the points where you want to know. As in, to keep it structured, I talked about the 4 things that matter to consulting: problem solving, leadership, delivering results, and my passion. And one of the things you'll notice if you decide to read it later is that in my cover letter, I talk about the things that are on my resume, but I talk about the stories that aren't there. As in, there are so many things I couldn't include in my resume that I can include in my cover letter. And I remember just getting people, even after I get into Bain, people who read my cover letter just reach out. I was like, oh, are these things true? And I was like, oh yeah, they're true. And those are just things that we talked about. As in, I don't name drop. I'm very short. As in, literally, thank you for considering me as a job. This is why I think I'll be perfect for the role. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, of course, I did bullets because it just draws your eyes and makes it easier to look at it. Yep, so that is the ability to demonstrate the soft skills there. So I really love cover letters as a result, because if you can stand out on your cover letter, you're going to do a great job. As in, looking at it from my view, where I have to spend Saturday, Sunday while I like to do this, but reading over, let's say, there's 400 applicants, maybe 200 have cover letters. After reading 200 cover letters, if I ever see one that's just short and to the point, I'm like, this person is saving me time. I love it. So again, these are things that to use way. And then when we have our one-on-ones, if you want, we'll talk about your cover letters and your resume as well. Okay, so secret to a really good cover letter and a behavioral interview when we get there. Okay, what do you guys notice about these words? And feel free to unmute and guess. One of these applies to each of y'all. Not all of them will apply, but only at least one.
They're like things that happen on each of our campuses.
Exactly. But what does it feel when you saw it happen? When you saw this in print?
But not all of us know what it's about, so it leaves us wondering what it is.
What it is, right? But for you, let's say you saw the big game week. Let's say somebody mentioned the big game to you. How do you feel? What's your first reaction?
It's like, oh, like what was your typical big game week? It's like a way to like form a connection, I guess.
It is, right? So see, like when I said it, you smiled. So it's the same idea, is that for every single one of these, this is something that happens on your campus. And imagine if someone said, oh, how did you spend your big game week? Or at Yale, what was it like walking up Science Hill in the summer or in the winter? And then people immediately go, whoa, did you go to Yale? And it's like one of those things where you form a really good connection. So I actually use this to my advantage, and if anything. So even though I was an economics major, I actually took probably 3/4 of the psychology major because I just love how people think. And one of the things that makes people stand out is actually if they understand the vocabulary of the people who are working there. So the reason is that you build this instant connection. You separate yourself from everyone else. So I want you guys to remember these 4 terms that I used on my cover letter, because we're going to actually get back to it, why this matters. So just remember this. The more personal you can be with your cover letter, the more of a connection you'll form. So if you look at this, look on the left-hand side, this is literally the Bain website, and this is my cover letter. So I literally took it from the recruiters and what people wrote and just had it on my. So obviously my McKinsey did the same thing. My BCG did the same thing. Anything outside of Consulting, I also did the same thing. In fact, in high school, when I was winning scholarships, so I won over $1 million in scholarship in high school. And one of my tricks was actually in my essay, I would incorporate the mission and everything that was on their website very subtly, and then people just resonated. So it's like just so psychological. But again, one of the things you should do with your cover letter and your resume and everything else is check the website. So you literally can map everything there. So my McKinsey looks like the McKinsey site, my BCG. So check the website. Second, check the Glassdoor. They have a bunch of things. For example, at Bain, one of the sayings is a Bainey never lets another Bainey fail. It is like our mantra. It is the thing that brings us all together. So during one of my behavioral interviews, when they switched the questions back to, do you have any questions for us or the partner, so forth, or whoever it was, I always ask them, yeah, I know a Bainey never lets a Bainey fail. And then they would smile. And I said, what's your favorite a Bainey never lets a never Bainey fail story? And then they would just go on for like 10 minutes. It's just, it was a good day. So again, you're not only learning tactical tricks, hopefully you're learning these psychological tricks that you can use in your regular life as well. But checking Glassdoor for BCG, McKinsey, you also apply the same thing. And any firm that you apply to, if you can speak the language, you've already won half the battle. And then third, just talk to people. So best way to do this is set up coffee chats, set up info sessions, and so forth. I think the common mistake that people make when they go to these info sessions or these coffee chats is that they think that it's about them. It's not about you. It's about the other person. And I'll tell you a very incidental story. But I went to a Bain info session. Again, my mentality is to find out if I want to apply for this firm, because if the fit is not there, I don't want to even consider it. So I went to Bain and ended up, there was one woman who didn't get it. For some reason, no one went to her. Everyone else went, she was a consultant. Everyone else went to like the managers and the partners. So it was like 10 to 20 to 1. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen this. So I went to this one woman who was just in the corner who arrived late and was just getting her name tag. And I said, hi, I'm Davis. She's like, oh, I'm Maria. And then we ended up talking. And then I'd done my research on Glassdoor with all of this. So I asked her, was a Bainey, never Bainey fail, and all these other stories. And so we ended up talking for an hour. I probably spoke about 10 minutes of it. She spoke like 50 minutes. And then it was the end of the night. We all get home. Next day, I go to my interview. Guess who my interviewer is? It's that woman who was in the corner of my first round. And so we went through the case. Case went okay. And then at the end of it, she said, all right, behavioral interview. We did it. And then she said, Davis, do you have any questions? Actually, you know what? We already had an hour of this. You're good. So I left early. And then she ended up just writing me great feedback. She's like, yeah, Davis, no, you're great. As in, I felt like we really got connected. I knew you a lot. And remember, I spoke for 10 minutes. She spoke for 50. So talk to people, but the goal of these info sessions is not about you. It's about them. So use these info sessions. You'll quickly realize the firms you like and you don't like. And of course, the question I get is, what makes these firms different? So you guys should do your own research, but a little history about it. So as you know, McKinsey started is the biggest of the big three. So this is only including McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. Obviously, there's a lot more: Deloitte, Accenture, Oliver Wyman, and all these other firms that I'm not including. I'm just including these big three just to give you an example of the type of research that I would do. Is I would know the history of them. For example, I know that McKinsey was founded the earliest, BCG later, and then Bain spun off from BCG. And the difference between them is there's three things that I want you guys to know is their structure. So a lot of times they talk about these, essentially these stereotypes for each of the firms. And then you might have heard that McKinsey is like the prestigious one or the most stuck up one. You might have heard of BCG as the most academic, or the bad term is the nerdy one. Or Bain is the fun one, or slash the drunken one. So it's but you have to wonder, what is it that plays into that reputation? So a lot of it actually comes down to how they're structured and how they're staffed. For example, at McKinsey, they have what's called a diamond structure. What this means is that if you could imagine the top is like the most senior people and the bottom is the most junior people, they have the most people in the middle. So this post-MBA role. So these people traditionally, when they come out, they're in business school, they've had their partying, some of them have kids and families and wives and significant others. So as a result, you have most of your firm is this middle layer. And because you're staffed globally, people are just in projects around the world, you're never truly in the office at the same time. So the office culture doesn't come out. But what does come out is the fact that you have this breadth of experience, this international brand, and this awareness. So that's why McKinsey is known for this international brand, this prestige. They're older, but also their employees, they have to travel the world and get to see different teams around the world. As in, I have a friend who was in a project in Kuala Lumpur, and now he's in Palo Alto working with a tech company. So again, all around the world, he's going to be in Europe next. The fact that he doesn't really know his office, but the trade-off is that he has this international experience. So if that's something that you care about and you want, McKinsey is going to be something that you should consider. Again, pros and cons of that. And of course, their internal saying is, what would Marvin do? So this is dying out a little bit, but essentially they used to have this saying where their founder is a guy named Marvin, and Marvin has these values. And if you're ever stuck, you would ever say, what would Marvin do? And that's the McKinsey, think of it as their value compass. For BCG has similar diamond structure, but they have what's called a regional staffing. So even though it's global to a certain extent, as in you're not going to trade all around the world unless there's a reason to, because as a result, the people who tend to go to BCG are also this post-MBA role, but because they're regional, they can come home, and a lot of it, you combine the two, being able to stay somewhat local, and you have people who are family level, it becomes very family centric. So what you'll notice at BCG events is that they invite you to welcome your significant others, your husbands, your wives, and your kids. So their office retreats, their night outs, their dinners, you'll find family members. So their culture there is more about the family centric. And this is why, because their staffing model helps enable that. Plus they have a diamond structure, which means a lot of the people are in this middle layer. And of course, their internal saying is unlock insights. It's not something that they say very readily, but it's something that you think about is, and we'll talk about this in the casing. It is also something BCG looks for in casing is how creative can you get with your framework? Because one of the things that's great about BCG is when they're pitching new projects, they always talk about, we have this innovative framework that we want to break into. In fact, if you look at a lot of the newer industries in digital, BCG is one of the first to break into it. So BCG has their own wing called Digital Ventures. Bain only in the last year has started doing that. So we're way behind because BCG is always thinking about what is the next thing? What is the new thing that we can do? How can we get more creative with what we have? So the frameworks, so the things that you do at BCG, if you value learning a lot, as well as just trying different frameworks, it's a great place to be. And it's very family centric. So my friends who are there, who are post-MBA, really enjoy it. The only con is that if you're looking for that social circle, BCG is not really it for people who are out of undergrad. And then you have Bain, which is what I love, of course. That's where I came from. Is we have what's called a pyramid structure, which is essentially like a diamond, except most of the bulk of the company is actually the young folks. So essentially, as a result, you have a bunch of drinking events. You have these events where it's a lot of very social. And as a result, you get this fratty culture. It's not that it's fratty, you don't hire friends, and I don't really like to go out, but it's more the fact that because you have so many young folks, a lot of people are leading initiatives. For example, at Bain, I was given one of the things I wanted to do was host speaker events. So Bain gave me a $32,000 budget every year for me to host these Friday events for people. And a friend of mine wanted to host a ski trip. She got a budget to do that. So Bain is very centric on that. The con, of course, is because it's young, people tend to not have significant others and they tend to not obviously have kids. Is the result from it is a lot of the events are very exclusive to the firm. So for example, at our offsite, even though BCG enables you to bring your family, for Bain, you could not bring your significant others. Even partners who are married to former alums of Bain were not able to bring those alums unless the alum was dropping off or picking up that person from the retreat. So again, this speaks to the culture because they keep it very in-house. So the pro of this, of course, is that we have a lot of fun. You get to know people. But one of the jokes is that when you're at Bain, your best friends tend to be also at Bain. So again, the balancing between the two. So my friends at McKinsey and BCG have a lot of, on average, of course, when they think about the breakdown of their friend group, a lot of it is outside of their work. But for Bain, a lot of it's inside. It's not one or it's better than the other. It's more about the fact that you're locally staffed. It means your team is all in one office. You're spending a lot of time together. Plus, you have a lot of young folks driving the fun event. And the people who come to Bain tend to like having fun. It's what happens. And the saying is, a Bainey never lets a never Bainey fail, as I mentioned. And I'll share you a big story, but there's many, many stories. But one of the stories is one of my goals for 2016 was to build a school in Laos. It's something I always wanted to do. Something I did before I came to Bain was helping them build schools. So I needed to raise money to build a school in this village. So I ended up sending out an email organizing this 5K run where people would donate, run. And my goal was at the end of the year, we would donate enough for one classroom and then sponsor it for a year. I sent one email out to the office just to Bay San Francisco. And long story short, 3 weeks later, we had 30, 40 people from the Bain office running in my 5K. And not only did we raise enough for one classroom, we raised enough for 3 classrooms. And not only for 1 year, but we were able to sponsor all 3 classrooms for 3 years. And this is the whole idea of a Bainey never lets a Bainey fail. And it's like our mantra. And then I'll get into more stories, but there's one where this year, 2017, my goal was to compete in the World Championships of Public Speaking. Let's just know I received a lot of help from Bain all around the world just for that one random goal. So again, that's how a high level overview of how all 3 firms are different. So now you have a little bit more clarity when you write your cover letter, your resume, when you go into your interviews, as well as when you talk to people from these firms, how to be different, how to stand out is by knowing these firms. Again, these are things that I knew when I was recruiting, but I only know now more that I've experienced it. But again, it really helped me when I was interviewing to know these things. Cool. So every letter, make it unique. So for example, the left-hand side is my Bain one. The right-hand side is my BCG one. And of course, I changed the language there because BCG on their website said they like creativity, curiosity, and ability to quickly adapt. So swapped it out. Stories were very similar, but just swapped out the language. And obviously, both of them, even though I didn't get the BCG offer due to culture fit, I remember Shannon, the person who was recruiting, said, "This is a really well thought out cover letter." As in, I didn't grade this, but she said, "John, this is really thoughtful." I was like, "Thanks." It's almost as if I read your website, right? Almost like I wrote it. So again, play that to your strengths. As in, this little trick pays off itself. So the approach I recommend is to research each of the firm that you're trying to go to. So it doesn't even need to apply to consulting. It literally could be a boutique consulting firm or even outside, like Dropbox, Facebook, Google, whatever it is. Research the firm, and then outline the strengths that you demonstrate and the gaps that you need to explain. And then third, just tell a story about each of the points. For example, all the points I made in my cover letter is essentially, when you read it, is a story about one point I'm making. So again, it's the quality versus the quantity. And then I always have 5 people look it over who I trust. So again, I also use Fiverr for reading my resumes. London is great. As in, London and Singapore are fantastic. Get it done when you're asleep. It's fantastic. And then of course, revise, fix, and then cut words. So I always aim for the shortest resume possible. And then when it's done, I send it. So another tip is don't send it in the day it is due. Send it in the day before it's due. Because otherwise you might just do something like upload the wrong firm. As in, which is funny because the friend who did that, I looked at her timestamp. It was literally 2 minutes before midnight when she uploaded it. So I knew she was in a rush. So again, the earlier you can get started on this, and you guys all have a couple weeks before any of this is due. So get a head start on it. Great. So pretty much that's the summary of the cover letter, is just make it personal. And just, it's not about how much you can squeeze in. It's about the quality of your cover letter. Make it personal. Do your research. Okay, so that's the summary of today. I know we went half an hour over time, so thanks for your time, guys. Is that we discussed what the recruiting process looks like, how recruiters grade candidates. We learned what an outstanding resume looks like, and then we talked about the cover letter and how it can make or break your first round invite. With that being said, there's 2 more things. Is first, any questions? Man, either I'm explaining things really well, there's no one listening to me right now because I literally am sharing my screens. Like it feels like I can be talking to no one right now, or you guys can ask me one-on-one. Yep.
Quick question. So you mentioned before a bit about like having a consulting background. Like what exactly does having a consulting background mean?
Oh, that's a good clarifying question, actually. So when I think about a consulting background, so for example, if you're at Berkeley, I'm using Berkeley as an example here, is you traditionally will go to Haas. You would have been a business major. You would have worked at a Big Four or a boutique consulting firm. You would have been in the BC. For everyone else, that's the Berkeley Consulting Group. And then you were in BC. You traditionally took classes in economics, like the traditional, what you would consider as a prerequisite for consulting. I would think about the extracurriculars, the major, as well as the internships.
Gotcha.
So as someone who's untraditional you would be a great example. As someone who is heavily more towards research, even though you have the economics and the VC background, but it's just, even though you didn't intern at, let's say, a Deloitte, at Accenture, or an EY, you demonstrate the ability to be able to do it. So that's why I say as traditional, as in if I see someone who spent 3 summers working at, let's say, LEK, Accenture, and EY, I would say, oh, this person probably has the potential to do the job. Versus someone who, let's say, spent 3 summers in lab, or let's say at Genentech or something. Then they have to demonstrate why those skills apply to consulting.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Keep asking questions. Awesome, guys. Any questions? All right. So,
Thanks,
in case,
David.
yeah. Really not. Is that you?
Yes.
Cool. What's up?
Oh, nothing. I just said thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Okay, hopefully you guys had fun. It was like 90 minutes of me talking, so hopefully I was energetic throughout the whole process. It was like my goal here. It's like I don't like boring lectures. So with no questions then, so next steps is I'm gonna send this out. I want you guys to use the information you've learned today to just revise your resume and your cover letter. And then I'm gonna send a post module 1 survey tomorrow. For example, I wanna know feedback. As in, Davis, I wish you had stayed within an hour, then I could know to cut more material. Or you can say, Davis, I wish Q&A was easier, or Davis, you spoke too fast, whatever it is. I want to know your feedback about how I can make this experience better for you moving forward. And third, if you haven't already, let's schedule your one-on-one call. As in, we can be using it to view your resume or your cover letter. We can talk about how to case, we can talk about fit, whatever it is. Or after going through this, you can be like, Davis, I've decided management consulting is terrible. As in, if you are a representation of consulting, I would like to just call it quits right now. Okay? Anything that you guys want to talk about. And then the 4th thing is I'll start a Facebook group for you guys to have casing or ask questions or whatever it is. But again, you guys should already know, but at this point, I think most of you guys have sent me questions in between when you guys enrolled and now. So continue to send questions, and I'm gonna do my best to send them back as quickly as possible. So I want you guys to be moving forward. And then the last thing is, it seems like this time works for everyone, Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific time / 10 p.m. East Coast time. So let's just keep that time moving forward. And I also know that 2 of you guys have Labor Day plans that can't make next Thursday. So what I'll do is I'll record the videos like I am today. And then when I'm done, we can have a one-on-one and you guys can view the materials. In fact, yeah, we can use that time to discuss it after Labor Day. So I'll send up a follow-up email. You guys have any questions between then, let me know. Cool. So was today helpful, guys?
It was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome.
I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, but be honest on the surveys and so forth. If you find that if it wasn't useful, let me know. But hopefully today was valuable. And you learned something that you would not have learned by Googling. Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Take care.
You're the
Bye-bye.
best, Davis.
Thanks, guys.